What up, party people? We are starting a new series titled Unafraid. And this week, we're going to focus on how God can turn fear into courage. I don't know about you all, but I know that there has been a lot of moments in my life where I have felt very fearful. And I needed to give myself a pep talk and tell myself, it's okay to be afraid, but you need to be strong, Bianca. And that's what we're going to focus on this week, is how God can turn our fear into courage. We're going to look into the life of Queen Esther. She's actually one of my favorite women in the Bible, and her story it's just amazing. Now, Esther's life was a roller coaster. It was full of ups and downs and twists and turns. And if we're being honest, we can say that Esther's life, just like our life, is full. It's a roller coaster. We go through our ups, our downs, and twists and turns. We get excited for some things, and then we feel fearful at some moments. And that's what we're going to go ahead and dive deep on today. I'm not sure about you, but I absolutely love roller coasters. I am a roller coaster junkie. Listen, if it's gonna make me scream, pass out, maybe even poop my pants a little bit, I don't do that, but I'm just saying, if it's gonna make me do that, then I absolutely love the feeling of being on a roller coaster. Now, if I'm being honest though, when I think about my life being a roller coaster, I don't like that. I don't like that I have to go through ups and downs and twists and turns and shakes. I'm not okay with that. But I want y'all to think about this, and we're going to look into the life of Queen Esther and how her life was a roller coaster, but in the end, it was worth the ride, and it was beautiful. Now, here are some things about Queen Esther. Her parents died. She was one of God's people. She's a Jewish woman, and she faced a lot of oppression. However, as life goes on, she is adopted by her cousin after her parents have died. She becomes queen, okay? The king that she's married to is very unpredictable. He's a little scary. She has to hide that she's one of God's people. She is now in place to help God's people. And then in the end, she may get executed for doing something really good. So you can say that Queen Esther's life it's just a roller coaster of emotions, right? Now, this is what I want you all to remember. She was a Jewish woman living in ancient Persia. And because she was a Jewish woman living in ancient Persia, this is a pretty big deal. Now, after Xerxes' first wife, this is King Xerxes' first wife, did something that didn't please him, he banished her and he began looking for a new wife. So he looks at his wife, he's like, nah, I don't like what you did. Done, killing you off, right? So that's what he does. And now he's on the prowl, I should say, for a new wife. And he chooses Esther. So Esther now becomes queen. Now, this was a big deal because she became the queen of Persia. But remember, she's not Persian, she's Jewish. So this is a pretty big piece in her story. Now, you would think oh man, she becomes a queen and you get your happily ever after. This isn't Cinderella. This is not Snow White. This isn't Princess and the Frog. This is not this story at all. This marriage for Esther was very dangerous. And this is why that marriage was very dangerous. Because she was married to the king, she got some inside information, okay? She knew a few secrets. Now, Mordecai, there's this guy named Mordecai. This is Esther's cousin. Mordecai is a guy who ends up adopting Esther when she loses her parents, okay? Mordecai was one of God's people who was already in a high position in the king's court. So he urges Esther to protect her life and reputation by keeping her heritage, her culture, and where she's from a secret. Knowing how dangerous it was for both him and Esther, they committed to help keep each other safe and keep their secrets safe. And this was all in works to protect God's people. Esther was starting to see the dream of being part of the bigger picture come true, but it came with some challenging moments of decision for her. Esther's situation was a roller coaster. She was a woman, part of a minority group of people in place of authority. And she had the power to help keep God's people safe from those who wanted to harm them. That was a pretty big deal. She felt like she had a lot of responsibility. She had a secret. She was Jewish. And that secret could cause great harm to her But she also knew that if she kept the secret safe, that she can protect God's people, the Jewish people. So she knew that choosing to be courageous in this moment had a high price. Now, Haman, who is a Persian official, he sought to eliminate God's people and sentence them all to death. And we know that Esther was the only one who had access to the king at this time. So Haman is a Persian official, and he wanted to eliminate all of God's chosen people. Well, all of his people, I should say, the Jewish people. Now, Esther here knew that she had to make a decision. She knew that since she had access to the king, she could either try to convince the king to not agree with him and not kill off all the Jewish people, or she can just ignore it and not do anything about it. So at this moment, she had to make a very bold decision. She had to decide whether she would speak up for her people or let Haman's prejudice win. Now, if she were going to do this, it would require a big deal of courage, I should say. She knew she would have to make her case without an invitation from the king, because there's no way that the king would listen to her, even though she's married to him. She knew in Persia at this time, remember this, going before the king without being asked was an offense that could be punished by execution. So she knew if she spoke to the king without permission, then she can possibly be killed for this. Imagine the fear that she had going into this conversation. If she knew what was possible, that she could either save her people or she may have failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Now let's go ahead into the Bible. Esther 7:1-6 says this. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. On the second occasion, while they were drinking wine, the king said to Esther, "Tell me what you want, Queen Esther. What is your request, and I will give it to you, even if it's half the kingdom." Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request, I ask that my life and the lives of my people will be spared. For my people and I have been sold to those who would kill, slaughter, and annihilate us. If we had merely been sold as slaves, I could remain quiet, for that would be too trivial a matter to warrant disturbing the king." "Who would do such a thing?" King Xerxes demanded. "Who would be so presumptuous as to touch you?" Esther replied, "This wicked Haman is our adversary and our enemy." Haman grew pale with fright before the king and queen. So here is Queen Esther, King Xerxes, and Haman, and they're all sitting together. And the king is like, "Esther, what do you want? What is it that you want? I'll give you half of my kingdom." And she's like, "Can you spare my people? I'm asking you to spare my people, save my people." And Haman got really nervous because Queen Esther's like, "That guy right there, he's our enemy. He's our greatest enemy." And so of course Haman's like, "Oh man, she's talking about me? I'm the enemy here." So of course he gets a little nervous. He gets a little frightened because he's in front of the king. Now, here's the reality is that in this situation, this is something that we don't have to worry about. We're not kings and queens, and we're not over here saying, "Yeah, spare my people and kill this person." We're not doing any of that. But you can just imagine what Esther felt in that moment. She needed to speak up for those who could not speak up for themselves. And I don't know about you, if you ever been in a situation where you had to do something where you needed a lot of courage, you needed to be brave. I know when I was at your age in middle school, I had a friend. Let's just call her Stephanie. These people, that's not their names, but I'm just going to give you some makeup names, okay? Her name was Stephanie. Now, Stephanie was one of my greatest friends, but she had a best friend. Her name was Nicole. Stephanie and Nicole were inseparable. And I love Stephanie as a sister. I didn't know much of Nicole. We hung out in the same group, but I didn't really talk to her. Now, when Stephanie would exit the room or not be in the group of friends that we were in, Nicole would talk disgustingly about Stephanie. She would call her all types of names, and she was very mean and judgmental towards her. But then the moment Stephanie would come back or they'd be friends and hanging out, she would act like they were just the best of friends and nothing happened. And I, as Stephanie's friend, I couldn't take this any longer. I couldn't take the fact that Nicole was talking so bad about her. So I had a tough decision to make. I could tell Stephanie the truth and hope that she would confront Nicole, or I can just ignore what Nicole is doing and be a fake friend to Stephanie. And I just knew that wasn't worth it for me. I knew that I needed to do the right thing. So what did I do? I went to Stephanie and I said, "This is what I'm aware of, and Nicole's not being really kind about it. And you can do what you want with that information, but I care about you and I want you to know." And Stephanie looked at me and was forever grateful that I did such thing. And her and Nicole stopped being friends, and Stephanie and I's relationship grew, and we became the best of friends. But I knew in that moment that I needed courage. I was really afraid of what the outcome would be. And like Queen Esther, I had to make a tough decision. Now, that decision of friendship isn't about like protecting my people, but it's the same thing. I needed courage, and I needed to know, I needed to trust in God in that moment. As the story goes on with Esther, Esther was confronted with fear, but she went ahead and throughout her community and her cousin praying for her, and God working in the background, her fear transformed into exposing Haman's evil plot. And because of that, she saved many people's lives. Now, what happened with Esther can happen with us too. Now, that moment when fear creeps in, we know that courage is what can come through. And that's what Esther did. She was afraid, but instead she allowed God to use her, and courage came from that. We all have moments in our life when something scary happens to us, whether it's our friends being ugly and we have to make a big decision, whether our family's falling apart, or whether we know someone who's sick with something. We have some big decisions to make. Esther's story shows us that we can trust God to transform our fears from bad circumstances into courage. Now, Paul says this in 2 Corinthians 4, 6 through 12. For God said, let there be light in the darkness, has made this light shine in our hearts so we can know the glory of God that is seen in the face of Jesus Christ. We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God and not from ourselves. We are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. Through suffering, our body continues to share in the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be seen in our bodies. Yes, we live under constant danger of death because we serve Jesus, so that life of Jesus will be evident in our dying bodies. So we live in the face of death, but that has resulted in eternal life for you. Paul told them that facing the scary parts of our life, of the roller coaster that we're on, sometimes it feels like we're getting crushed by twists and turns. However, he reminded us that Jesus experienced similar fears and pains when he was crucified. But God had the last word when he was resurrected. So remember, when we feel shaken and twisted and turned, and it doesn't feel like we know what we're doing, remember that God can turn our fear into courage. And just like he used Esther in that moment to free her people and to save her people, God can use our fears and turn it into courage as well.